One of the things that make Phaser stand out from other HTML5 game engines out there is the ability to work with particles. What does it mean to work with particles? It means that you can have explosions or chimney emissions and things like that, where you have a small element that's repeated multiple times to create different effects. So the first thing we need is an image that will be our elemental particle. And what we'll do in this lesson is create an explosion with particles when you kill an enemy. Our particle is this file called enemyparticle.png. It is simply a 2 by 2 pixel red square. Super simple. And what we want to do is implement this explosion inside of the damage method of our enemy prefab. So after we show the animation, if the health of the enemy has reached 0 or below 0, then we need to show an explosion. Let's start by checking that. Is this .health less or equal than 0? Then we will create a new emitter. I recommend that after watching this video you look at the documentation for the emitter object, so you understand better what the parameters mean and what other options there are. So I'm gonna explain it as in the most comprehensive way, so you know what we're doing, exactly what it means. But take a look, because there are more methods that you can use. So I'm gonna call this emitter. It will be this.game.add.emitter. And then what's the position? It will be the position of my enemy, because that's where the explosion is gonna go. That's the center of the explosion. How many particles will the explosion have? Let's say that it will have 100 particles. Okay, let's actually define what the particle would look like. We already loaded the particle in game state in our preload method. We loaded it and called it enemy particle. So we'll grab this name, because that's the name that we need, enemy particle. Then we can set a minimum and maximum speed for our particles. So some particles will go faster, some other ones slower, but it will all be in between this range. So the particle will actually, the minimum particle speed, we want them all to be at the same. So the minimum is just going to be on it's going to be on X and Y, it's going to be minus 200. And the maximum, both on X and Y, will be 200. That means that some of the particles will go on a negative direction up to 200 velocity. Some other ones will go on a positive direction at that speed. So we'll have particles going everywhere, basically, from its center. It will be an explosion, in other words. Particles will not obey gravity. So we'll set gravity to 0. We had an error here in this part. It is actually make particles, and in this part we need to set to these values. The last step is to actually initiate the explosion. That's what I'm going to set now. So I'm going to type in emitter.start, and the parameters now are very interesting. The first parameter is whether we want an explosion or not. If we need an explosion, then all the particles are released at the same time, all 100 of them. So we'll enter true. We do want an explosion. Then how long will they live for? We'll give them a lifespan of 500 milliseconds, basically half a second. So after half a second, each particle will disappear, will die. Frequency is the next parameter. Since it's an explosion, you don't need frequency. If it wasn't an explosion, you could set a frequency. You could say, I want X number of particles released every 5 milliseconds or every 1 second, or whichever number you want. So I'm going to enter null, because this is not the case. We don't want a frequency. And then how many do we want released? I'll just enter all of them. All 100 will be released. So let's test this. See if we kill this enemy, what the result will be. So let's shoot it, and you saw there was an explosion. Actually, I can make this a bit bigger so that you can appreciate it a bit. You can appreciate it better. Let's have another try. Particle effects are actually really cool, and they can have so many usages in your games. You can make a lot of different things with them. So you have now your particle explosions. Let me summarize what we did. Inside of the damaging method, we check for health. If the health is negative, basically we've killed this guy. We create an emitter. We set the position of the emitter, how many particles there will be, so you can make explosions with a lot more particles. Then what the sprite is going to be, what the key of this image is. We set a minimum, maximum particle speed. If you only wanted particles that go upwards, you would set only positive values in y, which would be this two. So you can define if it's going to be like a circular explosion or only one corner on one side. Then gravity, are particles going to fall? And you actually have to start the emitter for the explosion to occur. You define whether it's an explosion or not. How long do these particles have to live? Is there a frequency in which they get released, or do they all get released at once? So this is kind of same in a way. But you could specify, every X number of seconds, of milliseconds, they will be released. And how many are we releasing? All of them at 100. So we're releasing all of them.